Hi YouTube, this is Mike, Grey 1951, and the video I'm doing now is kind of a special one. I'm doing this at the request of one of my friends on Facebook and YouTube, a guy named Harry Benson, who goes by the YouTube name of Maca Photos. I'll put a link below so you can find his channel. And Harry asked me if I would make a video about Bette Davis. I talk about her a lot, but I've never done an actual video talking about her films. Harry told me that his mother was a big Bette Davis fan, and he is as well. So Harry, I'm very happy to do this, and I'm dedicating this to you and to your mom. So, Bette Davis, wow, where to start? I'm a huge Bette Davis fan. I have a huge collection of her films, which one of these days I'll make a video and I'll show everybody what I have and maybe talk about each one a little bit. But just as kind of an overview of some of the things that I like during her long career, I was thinking about doing a top 5 Bette Davis film list, and I realized I couldn't stop with 5, so it's going to come up to be about 6 or 7. So please bear with me here. So just as kind of a beginning on how Bette Davis got started, she was a stage actress in the late 1920s. Received pretty much good notices for a couple of plays she had done on Broadway, and then got a chance to audition for Universal Studios. In those days, in the late 20s, early 30s, when sound films were coming into existence, the studios were looking for actors who had good voices, so they turned to the stage, and that's how she got her chance. So she signed with Universal in 1930, and in the years 1931, 1932, she made 6 films for Universal, all supporting roles, very low-budget films, and then her option was dropped, and she thought she was all washed up. So as she was literally packing her clothes to get ready to go back to New York, because she thought she had lost her chance to be in films, she received a phone call from an actor and a playwright named George Arliss. He was an English actor who was very well known for working on the stage, had made many silent films, and now was working in sound films. And he asked her if she would like to audition for a part in his new film at Warner Brothers called The Man Who Played God. So she went to Warner Brothers, and she made this film. It was a supporting role, and she got a lot of good notices for this. George Arliss later said in an interview that, well, actually, I think it was in his autobiography, he said that he was expecting to get from her a nice little performance, but that he was amazed at what she brought to this supporting role and how much depth she had as an actress. And he was very much impressed by her. So Bette Davis got her start because of this film, because of George Arliss. And she was signed by Warner Brothers, where she would stay for 18 years. So in the year 1932, she was working constantly. She made a total of, let's see, at Warner Brothers, she made 6 films in 1932, did another 5 or 6 in 1933, and another 5 or 6 in 1934. All quickly made, low-budget films where her stature as an actress was just slowly being built up by the studio. And it wasn't until 1934 that she literally became a star overnight in this film of Human Bondage, which was made on a loan out to RKO Studios, a film that she begged the head of Warner Brothers, Jack Warner, she begged him for months to let her go to RKO and make this film. No other actress in Hollywood wanted to play the role of Mildred Rogers, the slut Cockney waitress who has absolutely no moral fiber whatsoever, because she was such a hateful character. None of the big-name actresses of the time wanted to play her. And Bette Davis was dying to play her because she could see what a good role it was. So she went to RKO, she made this film, and it was a rousing success. The film itself is actually not that good. It's very slow, it's very laborious. Leslie Howard is pretty good, although it's kind of hard to be sympathetic with this guy because he's such a dope when it comes to this woman who absolutely, I mean, it's just such a shrew, and he keeps going back to her. I mean, it really is an obsession. But she was so incredibly impressive in this that after that, she was considered to be a major star. And the following year, she won her first Academy Award for a film called Dangerous. And then after that, it was one, well, no, she still struggled for a while. In fact, she walked away from her Warner Brothers contract in 1936 because they would not give her good parts. Although she lost that case, she came back to the studio and they gave her more chances to do good things. And that's when her star really began to rise. So she won her second Academy Award in 1938 for this film called Jezebel, which in a way was kind of a precursor to Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, although quite frankly, I think this is a lot more interesting. And then finally, one of her biggest years in her career was probably the biggest year in Hollywood history, 1939, where she played 4 great roles, all very different in films. And probably the biggest one of that year, the one that most people remember when they think of Bette Davis's career in the golden age of Hollywood, is this film Dark Victory, in which she played a young woman, a debutante, rich society chick who doesn't seem to have a care in the world except that she suddenly finds out that she has a brain tumor and she's going to die. And it could have been, by any other actress, it could have been just pure soap opera and unbelievable. But she is so good in this film that, I mean, I don't think anybody in the world doesn't like Bette Davis in Dark Victory. It's absolutely wonderful. And then she followed that up the next year with another great performance in a totally different kind of film called The Letter. Based on a short story by W. Somerset Maugham, she plays a woman who has, she has shot a man at the beginning of the film, and she claims that this man was trying to assault her, and that's why she shot him. Turns out that that's not the case. And it's one of the most literate films ever made. Just to hear Bette Davis speak that dialogue. I mean, she has the way she her accent, her voice, the way she is able to deliver dialogue is just, I guess I'm babbling here, I don't know. But anyway, this is one of my favorite films, Bette Davis, and another Academy Award nomination for her. And then followed up in 1942 by another film which was kind of the epitome of the woman's picture of that time, Now Voyager, which also was pure soap opera from start to finish. And again, by any other actress, it may not have worked. And she was not the first choice to play this part, but she went to Warner Brothers, Jack Warner again, and just said, look, let me play this. I know I can do this. And finally, she got her chance, and it's a really classic film. The one that has the famous line at the end where she says to Paul Henreid, "Don't let's ask for the moon, we have the stars." Beautiful, beautiful film. Okay, so after that, in the 1940s, Bette Davis, her star was rising, and then it started to kind of level off a little bit. And in the late 1940s, some of the films she was getting were not high quality as she had been given before. And she started to struggle a little bit. And finally, in 1949, after making a really bad movie called Beyond the Forest, she asked for her release from her contract. And so then she was a freelance actress for the rest of her career. So she may have thought that she was completely washed up, but of course she wasn't, because she came back with a fantastic movie called All About Eve, which again was kind of a fluke because she was not the actress chosen to play the part of Margot Channing. Margot Channing was an aging actress who is worried about getting older. She's worried about losing her lover, who is 8 years younger than she is. She's worried about being having other people take her place. She's worried about losing her looks. And lo and behold, she gets involved with this young woman named Eve, who pretends to be a worshipful fan, but in reality is trying to take Margot's place, not only on stage, but in the rest of her life as well. So it was just a great, great part for Bette Davis. She was not supposed to play this part. A great actress named Claudette Colbert was the first one chosen to play this over at 20th Century Fox. But she ended up injuring her back, and she wasn't able to play it. So Bette Davis was called in to take her place. And I can't imagine anybody else who could have done this part the way Bette Davis did. So this, I'm not really doing a top 5 here, but if I have to say my top films for Bette Davis, it would definitely be, this would definitely be number 1, or a tie for number 1 with this other wonderful film in her later career, 1962, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which is so incredible. I mean, this was the last great role that Bette Davis had. She received her last Academy Award nomination for this film. She should have won. Co-starring with Joan Crawford, another Hollywood legend. two totally different kinds of actresses playing sisters, which in a way was kind of difficult to believe because they look nothing alike, and they really are just completely different kinds of women. But the way they are both so talented, and the film was crafted so well that they made it believable. And Bette Davis just completely throws herself into this part and makes herself up to look like this child star who has been a has-been since she was like 8 years old, and has been an alcoholic and had a really sad and reclusive life, and who was still walking around thinking that she can make a comeback as doing what she did when she was 7 years old. Just a very impressive and moving performance by Bette Davis in this film. And speaking about the way she looked in this movie, it was kind of typical for her, because she was one of these actresses, one of the few actually, who never cared about the way she looked in film. She didn't care about always being beautiful and glamorous. She was willing to make herself look less attractive or completely unattractive if it was good for the part. She was very courageous in that way. So when she was, for example, in 1939, she was only 30 or 31 years old, and she was playing Queen Elizabeth. And she allowed herself to be completely deglamorized and look many, many years older, even at that very young age, when most actresses are trying to hold on to their youth. She made herself look old to go with the part, to make it believable. And the same year, she played a film called The Old Maid, in which she allowed herself to age from a beautiful young woman into an old spinster who was just very turned in and very unhappy and very bitter. So she was a very, very brave actress. So I would have to say that if I were doing a legitimate top 5 or top 10 here, and I'm not doing it very well, I would say that these two films would have to tie for number 1. But I have another special mention I'd like to bring up, and that is a film she made in 1952, 2 years after she did All About Eve. Even though All About Eve had given her a great comeback vehicle, she was at the top of her game. After All About Eve, for the rest of the 1950s, she struggled again. She was struggling. She made several films, but she was always, she was working hard to try to regain her position in films. And at times was successful and at times was not. But she made this film in 1952 called The Star, kind of a low-budget, low-case release. She received another Academy Award nomination for this. She plays a woman named Margaret Elliott. Again, an aging actress, kind of like what she did in All About Eve. Although in this film, she takes it a little bit farther. And she gives a great performance as a woman who again, is dealing with getting old and no longer being wanted in her chosen profession. And she's again, very courageous in this film. And what's interesting about this is that depending on the angle of the camera in many of her scenes, she sometimes looks like the Bette Davis of 1939. Just a certain angle of her face or the back of her neck, something like that. It's almost as though you can see her transitioning from being a young woman to being an older woman, and still very attractive and extremely, extremely talented and expressive. And this is also interesting because a lot of it was filmed on location in Hollywood, so you get to see Bette Davis walking down the street, in Beverly Hills or in Hollywood, and also shows her, she has a scene where Margaret Elliott decides, she's an Oscar-winning actress, right? Just like Bette Davis was. She decides she wants to take her Oscar out and get drunk. So she takes Bette Davis's real Oscar and uses it in the film and puts it up on the dashboard of her car while she's driving and she's drinking. So it's really, she pulled out a lot of stops to do this as well. So that's just a sample of some of the things I like about the career of Bette Davis. And if anybody has a question about any of these films or any kind of comments you'd like to make, please do so. I'd like to hear it. Okay? Thank you.